Hello there friends and welcome! For my first updated Pathfinder Enhanced Edition guide, we have a complete pet guide. All you need to know about pets in Wrath of the Righteous. To put it simply, pets are extremely overpowered in the game. They are pretty much the same as if having an extra full entire party slot. They can achieve very high physical scores, strength, dexterity and constitution, great attack bonus, with a lot of attacks per round, even the pets that only start with but a single attack. For example, my dog here has 10 entire attacks per round and can deal around 50 to 60 damage on a normal hit and double or triple that on a critical hit. Another amazing part about pets, of course, is their extreme armor class with little investment, which means your pets are a complete package. They can easily tank for your characters, while also possessing very high offensive capabilities. And don't forget that when your character is riding your pet, it is the pet's armor class that will count for combat. Both melee and ranged enemies will target your pet's armor class instead of the riders. Lastly, some of the pets, the best ones, also possess even crowd control on demand, that's right, because they will automatically knock the enemy down for free on almost all of their attacks. So without further ado, let us get started on our pet guide. First with pet selection and the best ones. After that I'll cover two builds. One focused mostly on offense and the other for the tankiest pet possible. Amusingly enough, there's quite a lot of different classes that can get pets. Most of them can actually, it's not just for example ranger. Shamans have a special archetype, sorcerers too, paladins can get a horse for free, monk has a mounted archetype, the same for magus, inquisitor and hunter can have pets, clerics and oracles too, cavaliers are all about mounted pets, even barbarians, so yeah. Another reason why pets are so important, the number of classes that can get them. Now when it comes to actual pet selection, the best overall are the pets that automatically trip for free. Because trip, you know, is one of the best crowd control abilities in the game. An enemy that is knocked down will not only lose their actions for the round, but they'll also take a massive -4 penalty to melee attacks, which ensures your allies will hit them to death. Lastly, if they survive the knockdown, when they get up, they'll proc an attack of opportunity, which is a free attack, from all of the surrounding allies, which basically marks them for death. Basically, if they're knocked down, they'll die, and if they get up, they'll also die. Before, the tripping pets were just the dog and the wolf, although the leopard and the lizard can also do it. Now, pets that have gore attacks, such as the triceratops, the boar, the mastodon, and the elk, should also be able to trip on every single one of their gore hits. The elk, unfortunately, at least as far as this video, so the first release of the Enhanced Edition, is bugged and doesn't really trip on its gore, but I imagine this will get fixed eventually. To me, the best choices are still the dog and the wolf, mostly because their physical attacks, so their bites, can actually hit all three types of damage at once: piercing, bludgeoning, and also slashing. What this means is, if the enemy is immune or resistant to some of these, you'll always bypass it and just go for the best one. For example, if the enemy was immune to bludgeoning and piercing, we would hit them for slashing. Most of the gore pets, on the other hand, they only deal piercing damage. Look, it's not that much of a difference because not many enemies in Wrath are actually immune to physical damage. Note that this doesn't mean the other pets are bad, they just aren't as powerful. For example, the horse, which is the only pet many pet classes get, is still very much viable, right? And in this guide, you'll get a full tank build for your horse. Now there is something to be said about the leopard, because he is actually the strongest of the early game pets, that is, until around level 7. The leopard has the highest potential armor class early game. You can get even around 30 just at level 2, which is huge. Plus, it can also acquire very high attack bonus early on, around +10, and it does have 3 attacks just at level 1. One will be a bite which does strip, just like the dog and the wolf. The thing is, I don't believe this early boost to power is as needed, unless you are playing on unfair. Starting from around level 7, which is when the other pets gain a boost in power and evolve, your leopard will kinda be outclassed. I'm not saying it will be bad, it's just a little bit outclassed, but you know, it's still very much viable if you want. So now that we know the best pets, let's get started into our actual pet builds. My first one will be a more offensive focused pet that can actually tank too. After that, I'll go for a fully focused defensive pet, which is better suited for unfair, or characters that have a horse. So first let us start with our offensive focused pet build, which works the best for any of the tripping pets, the dog, the wolf and the other ones I mentioned. This is also actually my preferred pet build, because unless you were starting the game on unfair, you truly don't need to min-max armor class as early. Plus, this build can also achieve pretty high armor class anyways. So let's get started. So for our archetype, Bully is still the best choice for any tripping pet, since you gain the trip feat for free. Look, here's how it works. Like I said before, the dog, the wolf and the gore pets, they automatically trip on their main attacks for free, right? You don't have to use the trip feat, it's automatically applied to their attacks. They still do damage and they trip at the same time. Getting the actual trip feat, however, does grant us some very important advantages. It enhances the power of your trip attacks by +2. Second, the actual trip feat will also let us access some very important trip enhancing feats, mostly Fury's Fall and Tandem Trip that I will be picking for this build, so let's get started. For skills, focus on Athletics and Perception. Athletics, well, we are going Strength, and yes, pets can make some skill checks for you. Perception always helps because the more characters that have Perception, the higher the chances of you finding those secret items. And trust me, there's always something to find. For your first feat, Fury's Fall, without a doubt, this lets your Dexterity modifier also be added together with your Strength modifier to your trip attacks, which highly increases the chances of your trips working, since your pets can have both high strength and dexterity at the same time. For level 3, pick Combat Reflexes. Pets don't have that high critical range to make attacks of opportunity, but remember that they automatically trip the enemies down, right? And when the enemy tries to get up, assuming they don't die before that, it will proc an attack of opportunity from all of the nearby allies. And since the pets cannot get the Ever Ready mythic ability, this is one of the main ways of enhancing the number of attacks of opportunity they can make. At level 4, well, you have two options. Some of the teamwork feats that we'll be getting now require all pets to have at the very least 3 intelligence, and they mostly all have 2 only, which means you would have to increase it here at level 4. However, you can simply give your pet a headband of intelligence +2, it doesn't need to be any higher than that, we only need 3 intelligence, which then lets you bypass the need to increase intelligence here, so you can fully focus on strength instead. And yes, you can remove the headband later on, your feat will still remain in effect. Doing this or not is up to you. For my previous guide, I actually increased intelligence, so for this one, I'll just use the headband to compensate. So be sure to increase strength, which is also what you increase on all of the other levels. At level 5, for your first teamwork feat, if you have another pet that can trip, I definitely do. I do love my dogs and wolves. Tandem Trip is by far the best choice here, because it lets your pets, whenever they are threatening the same target, something that is pretty easy to do because eventually they grow in size, and you also have size enhancing spells, so they do have very high reach with their attacks, despite not having reach weapons. Whenever they make a trip attempt against the target, which they do on every of their bite attacks, pretty much all of their attacks, they get you roll twice and pick the best result. I don't think it needs any saying, this highly increases the chances of your trips working. If you don't have another pet, then I would go with Improved Initiative here. For level 7, you probably already know what I'm going to pick. Outflank, of course. The fact that pets can get teamwork feats is part of what makes them so powerful in Wrath of the Righteous as opposed to Kingmaker. For level 9, we'll get started on our Shatter Defenses package, so Weapon, Focus and Bite. For level 11, Improved Critical and Bite. So if your main character is a trickster, starting at this point, so level 13, 15 and 17, it would be in your best interest to get your pets the special trickster feats, so improved critical, etc. in Bite. Or Gore if you want with one of the Gore pets like the Boar. Then at 13, Dazzling Display, just for Shatter Defenses. And at 15, Shatter Defenses, of course, just in time for almost all of my other builds to also pick this at this point, because it is when our casters have access to the Frightful Aspect spell, which automatically shaken enemies, including even Demon Lords like the Scary and Baphomet, as to easily proc Shatter Defenses. So your pets will be hitting the enemies, no matter their armor class, with ease. For level 17, I would pick Improved Initiative, as at this point the enemies start getting way higher initiative at around chapter 5. Power Attack I don't find useful for pets, even the offensive focused ones, because you know, pets can't wield two-handed weapons, so the bonus is cut in half, not really that good. For the last level, so 19, Blind Fight, as usual, to bypass concealment from enemies that have it, from sorcerers other than illusion, so the True Seeing buff will not help you. Blind Fight, however, will. Now that we already have our fully offensive focus pet that can still have high AC, let's now cover the complete tank pet, which can of course achieve way higher armor class. This one I like to leave for the horse, because you know the horse can't really trip on attacks, so there's not much of a point in getting bully and all of the trip feats and so on. The horse has more feats to spare. And you can also tank with the horse and then have your other pets be more offensive focused. When it comes to your class, I would definitely choose Bulwark for the horse. Bulwark will provide more defenses early on by having both light and medium pet armor proficiency for free. For the upper mid and the late game, pet armor kinda stops mattering because you have enough dexterity bonus to easily achieve way higher without it, especially when combined with braces of armor plus 8. But for the early and the mid game, since magical vestment doesn't work on pets anymore, unless they have armor, it can make for a decent AC boost. For skill points, mobility, so you can have some synergy with fighting defensively, and then as usual perception. For your first feat, pick dodge. Now this is pretty important, because you need to get 3 intelligence to get started on Improved Unarmed Strike and the Crane style defensive feats. You do need 3 intelligence before level 3. The easiest way is of course a headband of +2 intelligence. For level 3, Improved Unarmed Strike. Because I already went for a more offensive focus on my dog build, for the horse is more about armor class, so I will be increasing dexterity. But you know you can still go with strength, as overall, unless you were on unfair for the early and the mid game, the extra armor class boost you get from dexterity at level up isn't like that important. At most it's something like +2 armor class eventually. And of course if you don't want to equip a headband, you would have to increase intelligence instead. For level 5, Crane Style. Then at level 7, Crane Wing. So by now we actually already have all of the defensive feats for very high armor class. The rest will come through buffs and gear. Then at level 9, it's kinda sad that we have to delay it for level 9 instead of 7, but Outflank is by far the way to go. At level 11, we can finally get Crane Riposte. The great part about this feat is that if an enemy was almost close to hitting us, that is, they only missed by 4 or less, they will provoke an attack of opportunity, which you know is a free attack from us. And even as a horse pet fully focused on defense, you're still hitting for a decent amount. For level 13, Improved Critical and Bite. The horse's main attack is a bite, so all of his attacks of opportunities will most likely be bites as well, including the extra attack from haste. The other are hoof attacks, which you know we won't bother upgrading. For level 15, you could go with combat reflexes, I just don't think it's needed because at this point, you already have, for example, the Clemency of Shadows ring, which grants your whole party an extra attack of opportunity, right? So the horse can get more than one attack of opportunity, even without combat reflexes. There are some different ways you can build your horse now, but I think the most efficient way is the Shatter Defenses package, even if it will only come online at level 19. I mean, at 19 you're still fighting some pretty powerful Chapter 5 foes like Vavakia Vanguards, the Scary, the final boss, all of the Inevitable Access DLC enemies, and they can have pretty high armor class, especially on unfair. With Shatter Defenses we'll highly bypass that, so there is some use to it even late game. Anyways, Weapon Focus and Bite, then Dazzling Display, and at last Shatter Defenses at 19 for your last feat. Now let's get into a very important section for pets, gear and buffing. I've received some comments in the past saying that they couldn't get their pets to tank, and the reason is simple: you are not properly taking care of your pets because you do need to both gear and also buff them, just like your own characters, for them to achieve their ultimate potential, especially armor class wise. The pets I have here, for example, are truly buffed to the max, but the reality is you don't need them to be as Godzilla tier. Right, for example, even without short-lasting bonuses from Touch of Good, Visions of Madness, and Guarded Hearth, we still have more than 70 attack bonus, which is enough for, you know, almost all of the content in the game, unless you were on unfair, and for the bosses there, you'll have these short buffs on demand. So let us get into the buffs. The first and one of the most important ones is Mage Armor. And that's right, you can buff your pet with Mage Armor. The +4 bonus to armor class is absolutely huge at the early game, especially because this can also come from potions and scrolls, and it always lasts at the very least 1 hour of real time, so plenty, even at the early game. Eventually you'll be able to replace this bonus with highly enchanted braces of armor, or pet armor even. Second, we have Bark Skin, which is your main source of natural armor class. Another very nice early level buff because of its very high duration of 10 minutes of real time per level. Just like Mage Armor, it will always be enough for any dungeon. Especially useful since pets will be focused on amulets that enhance their natural attacks instead of the natural armor class ones. Third, we have Shield of Faith, which will be your main source of deflection armor class. As pets cannot wear rings, the only other gear that gives the same benefit. Shield of Faith is a very low level divine spell, even if at the early game you won't have that high duration, although you can easily extend it and turn it into even 24 hours later on. Because you know it's just a level 1 spell, you'll have plenty of slots for it, especially when combined with abundant casting. Now, one of the most important pet buffs is Animal Growth, which by the way only works on animals, so it won't work on Ivo because she's a dragon. Animal Growth will not only increase the size of your pet, which does matter when it comes to riding them, but also give very high and rare size bonuses to strength and constitution, plus even an increase to their armor class, despite the small penalty to dexterity. So overall it is a very solid buff that will increase their strength, hit points, armor class, and even damage. Eventually you'll be able to replace it for legendary proportions, although it has a smaller size bonus to strength but a higher to constitution, and also a nice damage reduction property. The size increase is also 2 steps, so one bigger than Animal Growth, for even higher damage and reach. The horse is kind of funny in that if you cast legendary proportions it becomes truly immense. You might like it or not, because you know, the bigger the pet's hitbox, the higher the chances of it blocking your party members and so on. For another nice defensive buff you have Foresight. It is only a level 9 spell, so you get it kinda late, but it can grant you +2 insight bonus to armor class, another very rare type of bonus. There are other ways to get this earlier, such as the Inspiring Command domain ability from Nobility Domain, which I always get on my social builds, and I'll soon post an updated one for him. Of course, there is also some generic buffs like all of the animal ones, most importantly Bow Strength for strength, and Cast Grace for dexterity. Eventually you'll get mass versions of these that affect your whole party at once. There is also the Divine Spell Magical Vestment, which increases the enhancement bonus of your armor. Now, back in the days, Magical Vestment used to work even if your pet didn't have any armor, but now that has been nerfed or fixed to only be applied to actual armor, which means the only point in casting it in your pet is if it has any pet armor that has less than +5 enhancement. Another pretty nice buff is the Shield spell, for a +4 bonus to shield armor class, which matters a lot as pets cannot equip shields. The only issue is that this spell by default is a personal only spell, so will only affect the caster. However, if you have an alchemist on your party, through the infusion discovery, you'll be able to apply any personal spell on your allies, including shield on pets. Another very nice buff for this purpose is Animal Aspect, for the tripping pets that is, because it grants them a +4 competence boost to their tripping attempts. But you know, once again it is a personal only buff, so it will require either an alchemist, or in this case, because it is transmutation, a brown fur transmuter, who can cast personal only transmutation spells on allies, through the aid of the shared transmutation ability gained at level 9. In the same line of thought, echolocation can also help to allow your pets to bypass concealment. Lastly, the transformation buff can also be pretty useful. Pets by default have medium base attack bonus progression, which means they cap out at maximum +15 base attack bonus, and 3 attacks per round. With transformation, we set that to a fighter base attack bonus, so high, for a maximum of +20 and an extra main attack per round. Now these are just some main sources of buffing for your pets, but remember there are way more from, you know, class abilities, stuff like domain powers, that you can easily check on my buff stacking guide, linked to the site here or in the video description. Now let us cover pet gear at last. Pets can wear basically only amulets, belts, gloves, and there are some special gloves, pet armor, helmets, cloaks, and bracers. When it comes to the amulet slot, amulets that enhance their natural attacks are the best, either Mighty Fists, but the dexterity version works just fine as well. When it comes to pet armor, I only bother with it on my bulwark pets, basically the horse, only for the early and some of the mid game. There are some armors with decent enough effects, the problem is they all have very low max dexterity bonus, and eventually your pet will easily be able to achieve higher than +10 bonus to their dexterity, which means they are much better served by just having a bracers of armor and no actual armor at all. For example, notice how a +5 chainmail barding will tank my horse's armor class late game, right? more than 10 points of armor class lost. When it comes to belts, usually belts that enhance both strength and constitution. But I suppose if you wanted a tankier pet, you might as well go for strength and dexterity. Eventually, you can just get high physical scores into everything through belts of physical perfection. Now for the tank pets, there is also another very interesting belt called the Lizard Tail, which I believe you can buy at chapter 4. It grants a +3 morale bonus to armor class, something super rare, and also a +8 circumstance bonus to armor class, extraordinarily rare too, for the first round of every combat. So basically a total of +12 to armor class, which is quite huge. The first round of battle will be enough to outright either destroy the enemies, or at the very least, severely cripple them. So that +8 to AC will count. There are some other belts you can use, for example the Belt of Thunderous Charging, the Clutch of Corruption belt for the highest constitution enhancement possible, while also adding a debuff on critical hits, and the Display of Power belt too for the very useful -2 penalty to will aura. And well, your pets will always be very close to the enemy. When it comes to the gloves slot, pets can actually wear gloves, amusingly enough, but they also have a special type of gear here, the pads. For some example, we have unholy knee pads. There's also a holy version that adds either holy or unholy damage to their natural attacks. The knee pads of Mighty Swipe, which can let your pet hit all enemies nearby after a critical hit, and the Ultimate Predator for a bonus against animals, magical beasts, and monstrous humanoids. The claws of a sacred beast can also work, although the damage boost is only applied to unarmed attacks. Our pets have natural attacks which are different. However, the actual enhancement bonus to attack rolls still works, which is why we went from 99 to 100. If, however, you want the tankiest pet possible, then Aurelius embroidered gloves are the best here for the very rare +3 luck bonus to armor class. For the helmet slot, you have a few different choices. Later on, the Shy Lily's helmet is basically the best for both damage and tanking, thanks to the +4 profane bonus to strength and also +2 to armor class. You can also go with the Helmet of Camaraderie, which can increase your pet's armor class up to +3 morale, another very rare type of bonus, so even higher than that of Shy Lily. Lastly, the Triple Fin helmet can add an extra gore attack to your pet. As far as cloaks, usually the cloaks of resistance with the highest modifier possible, so your pets can achieve high saving throws, which are then further boosted by the Nature Oracle Mystery Revelation Friend to Animals, that Darren can easily get, as I will show you on my build guide for him. As far as braces, you absolutely want to focus on braces of armor when the +5 to +8 versions start dropping, usually around chapter 4. Before that, you can just rely on the mage armor spell or pet armor. Lastly, there is actually a special gloves in the game that can be equipped by the master of the pet to enhance the pet. The Stern Hand. It gives the pet a +6 untyped bonus to strength, which does matter because, you know, it does stack with everything else. The main issue, however, is that this item can be pretty dangerous, right? Because at the beginning of battle, your pet will have to make a will saving throw, the DC is pretty low, or start attacking party members. The main issue is that, remember, whenever you roll a 1 on a saving throw attempt, you will automatically fail, no matter if you had like +40 will or even higher than the DC, just from your will bonus. I don't think it needs any saying that having your pet, as strong as it is, start attacking party members will be a death sentence, especially the tripping pets, which is why I tend to go without these gloves. Well friends, so this was it for my updated pet guide for the Enhanced Edition. Of Wrath of the Righteous. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to answer them. As usual, please remember to like, subscribe and even consider becoming a channel member too. Thank you for watching and see you next time, friends, now with my updated companion builds.